Rain pounded the cracked pavement of downtown Chicago, the water rushing over concrete in tiny rivers. Alessandra clutched her daughter's hand tighter, her worn sneakers squelching through puddles as they hurried toward the bus stop. Her shift at the diner had run late again, and 5-year-old Maya was practically sleepwalking beside her. The screeching of tires against wet asphalt pierced the night air, followed by a sickening thud and the sound of metal crumpling. Alessandra instinctively pulled Maya behind a parked car, her heart hammering against her ribs as she peered around to see a black SUV careening into a narrow alleyway, pursued by another vehicle. Silence fell for several heartbeats before a man's pained groan echoed from the darkness. Despite every instinct screaming to walk away, Alessandra found herself moving toward the sound, Maya's small hand still clutched in hers. "Stay behind me, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The alley reeked of gasoline and wet garbage, illuminated only by the distant glow of streetlights. Through the gloom, she could make out the crumpled form of a man sprawled beside the damaged SUV, his expensive suit soaked with rain and what appeared to be blood. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, pinned beneath the vehicle's crushed door. "Please don't hurt me, I can't walk," the man begged, his Italian accent thick with pain as he raised a shaking hand. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but Alessandra could see the fear in his dark eyes as he tried unsuccessfully to free his trapped limb. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve, her brown eyes wide with concern. "Mommy, the bad man is hurt," she whispered, pointing to the injured stranger. "You always say we should help people who are hurt, even if they're scary." Headlights swept across the entrance to the alley, and the injured man's expression morphed into pure terror. "They're coming back to finish the job," he hissed through clenched teeth, fumbling inside his jacket with trembling fingers. "Take my phone, call the number labeled Franco, tell him where I am." Alessandra hesitated only a second before grabbing the offered phone, pulling Maya deeper into the shadows as the approaching vehicle slowed near the alley entrance. Her fingers trembled as she found the contact, pressing it to her ear while cradling her daughter protectively against her chest. The call connected on the second ring, a gruff voice answering in rapid Italian. Alessandra swallowed hard, whispering the location and situation as quickly as she could while keeping her voice down. The man on the other end went silent for a beat before promising help would arrive in minutes. The approaching car lingered at the alley entrance, its headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Alessandra could make out silhouettes of men inside, seemingly debating whether to enter the narrow passage. Her pulse roared in her ears as she pressed herself and Maya against the cold brick wall, praying they wouldn't be seen. A police siren wailed in the distance, causing the car to suddenly accelerate away from the scene. Alessandra released the breath she'd been holding, her legs nearly buckling with relief as she emerged from their hiding place. The injured man was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something darker, more calculating. "You should have run," he murmured, grimacing as he shifted his weight. "Getting involved with someone like me is dangerous, especially with your daughter." His gaze softened slightly as it landed on Maya, who was peering at him with undisguised curiosity from behind her mother's legs. A black car with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance, and 3 men in suits emerged, moving with practiced efficiency. They approached their injured boss with respectful deference, carefully freeing his trapped leg before helping him into the waiting vehicle. The smallest hint of vulnerability vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of cool authority. "Franco, ensure the woman and her daughter get home safely," the man commanded, his eyes never leaving Alessandra's face. "And bring them to the estate tomorrow. I'd like to properly thank the Good Samaritan who saved Victor Costello's life tonight." His words carried the weight of someone unaccustomed to having his orders questioned. As one of the men approached to escort them to a separate car, Alessandra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. The name Victor Costello echoed in her mind. She'd seen it in newspaper headlines, heard it whispered by nervous customers at the diner. She'd just saved the life of Chicago's most notorious mafia boss, and somehow she knew her quiet life would never be the same again. The following morning dawned with gray skies and the insistent ringing of Alessandra's phone. Franco's voice was polite but firm as he explained that men had been seen watching her apartment building. "Mr. Costello insists you and your daughter come to his estate immediately for your own protection," he stated, leaving no room for argument. Alessandra's hands shook as she packed a small bag for herself and Maya, her mind racing through limited options. Their apartment was a sanctuary they had built after escaping Maya's abusive father 3 years ago. Leaving it felt like surrendering something precious, something safe. Maya clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit to her chest, as they were escorted to a sleek black car with windows tinted so dark they might as well have been painted. Her wide brown eyes darted nervously between her mother's tense face and the stoic driver who barely acknowledged their existence. The Costello estate sprawled across several acres outside the city, surrounded by an imposing stone wall and security cameras that tracked their car's approach. Wrought iron gates swung open automatically, revealing manicured gardens and a mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. Victor Costello sat in a wheelchair on the mansion's wide veranda, his injured leg extended before him in a temporary cast. His piercing gaze followed their approach, calculating and intense despite the pallor of pain on his face. "The unlikely heroes arrive," he commented dryly as Franco escorted them up the steps. "I don't want your thanks or your protection," Alessandra stated firmly, gripping Maya's hand tighter. "We helped because it was the right thing to do, not to get involved in whatever dangerous business you're mixed up in." Her voice remained steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. A ghost of a smile touched Victor's lips as he leaned forward in his wheelchair. "Your apartment was visited by Donato's men last night, the same men who tried to kill me," he explained with clinical detachment. "You're already involved, Ms. Alessandra Reyes, whether you want to be or not." Maya slipped her hand free from her mother's grasp, approaching Victor with the fearless curiosity only a child could muster. "Does your leg hurt really bad?" she asked, pointing to his cast. "When I fell at the playground, my arm hurt for days and days until Mommy kissed it better." Something shifted in Victor's expression, a softening around the edges that transformed his face entirely for just a moment. "It does hurt," he admitted quietly, as if sharing a secret only with the little girl. "But I'm afraid your mother's kisses probably wouldn't help me much." A woman appeared silently in the doorway, introducing herself as Mrs. Davenport, the housekeeper. "I've prepared rooms for you both in the East Wing," she explained, her British accent crisp and efficient. "The grounds are completely secure, but I must insist you don't wander beyond them without an escort." As they followed Mrs. Davenport through marble hallways adorned with priceless artwork, Alessandra couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a gilded cage. Every window they passed revealed armed men patrolling the grounds. Every doorway seemed to hide watchful eyes monitoring their movements. Their rooms were adjoining suites of understated luxury, rich fabrics and soothing colors, furniture that probably cost more than Alessandra's yearly salary at the diner. Maya immediately ran to the window seat overlooking a garden filled with late-blooming roses and a small ornamental pond. "How long do we have to stay here?" Alessandra asked Mrs. Davenport quietly, careful that Maya couldn't overhear. The older woman's expression remained professionally neutral, but something like sympathy flickered briefly in her eyes before she turned toward the door. "Mr. Costello rarely allows outsiders into his home," she replied, her hand resting on the doorknob. "The fact that you're here at all rather than in a safe house suggests he sees something special in you, though whether that's a blessing or a curse remains to be seen." With those cryptic words, she slipped from the room, leaving Alessandra alone with her thoughts. Later that evening, as Maya slept peacefully in the adjoining room, Alessandra stood before the window watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. She startled at the soft knock on the door, turning to find Victor himself in the doorway, maneuvering his wheelchair with practiced ease. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, dark circles beneath his eyes testifying to the truth of his words. Pain medication never works quite as well as they promise. There was something almost vulnerable about him in that moment, the fearsome mafia boss replaced by a man fighting against physical weakness. Alessandra hesitated before inviting Victor inside, her instincts warring with unexpected compassion. She wheeled him toward the sitting area, noticing how he winced with each small bump despite his attempts to mask the pain. His presence filled the room with an intensity that made the spacious suite feel suddenly smaller. "Why were those men trying to kill you?" she asked directly, settling into the chair across from him. "I need to know what danger I've placed Maya in by helping you." Her eyes never left his face, searching for any hint of deception in his carefully controlled expression. Victor's fingers tapped against the armrest of his wheelchair, his jaw tightening momentarily. "The Donato family and I have a complicated history," he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. 6 months ago, they orchestrated an attack that killed my younger brother and left me unable to walk. The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. The doctor said I might regain some mobility with intensive therapy, but the damage to my spine was severe, he continued, a flash of raw vulnerability crossing his features. The attack was meant to weaken our family's position, make us appear vulnerable to our rivals. Alessandra felt an unwelcome pang of sympathy as she recognized the mask he wore. She had crafted a similar one after fleeing Maya's father. "I understand putting on a brave face," she admitted softly. "After I escaped Jason's abuse, I couldn't let anyone see how terrified I was that he'd find us again." Victor's dark eyes sharpened with interest, studying her face with renewed intensity. "Maya's father," he stated rather than asked, his expression darkening when Alessandra nodded. "Where is he now?" The question carried dangerous undertones that made her shiver despite the room's comfortable warmth. "Prison, for now," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. 3 more months on a battery charge that should have been attempted murder. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. She thought she'd buried that anger deep enough that it couldn't resurface. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the soft ticking of an antique clock and the distant rumble of thunder. 2 damaged people from different worlds, their scars invisible but defining every choice they'd made to survive. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he watched her. "Your daughter has your courage," he observed, glancing toward the door to Maya's room. "Few adults would approach me without fear, yet she spoke to me as if I were any ordinary man with an injured leg." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost handsome. Alessandra felt herself relaxing slightly despite her better judgment. "Maya sees the best in everyone. It terrifies me sometimes," she confessed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I worry that the world will take advantage of her kindness, that she'll be hurt by people who don't deserve her trust." Victor's hands gripped the wheelchair arms tighter, knuckles whitening momentarily. "I built walls to protect my family's empire, surrounded myself with armed men, and still the Donatos found a way to destroy what I loved most," he said bitterly. "Physical barriers mean nothing when betrayal comes from within." Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting golden patterns across the plush carpet as Alessandra blinked awake in confusion. She didn't remember falling asleep in the armchair, but a cashmere throw had been carefully draped over her. Victor must have covered her before leaving sometime in the night. The following days established an uneasy routine within the Costello mansion. Victor spent mornings with his physical therapist, afternoons in meetings behind closed doors, and evenings increasingly in their company. Maya's innocent chatter seemed to lighten something in him, breaking through layers of practiced coldness. Alessandra discovered the mansion's extensive library, losing herself in volumes of classic literature that had been mere titles in her community college courses. She was absorbed in Austin when Victor's wheelchair appeared silently beside her chair, a folder held carefully in his lap. "I had my people investigate Jason Miller," he stated without preamble, offering the folder with steady hands. "Your ex-husband's sentence has been reduced for good behavior. He'll be released next week, not in 3 months." The words fell between them like stones, shattering the fragile peace she had begun to feel. Alessandra's hands trembled as she took the folder, horror crawling up her spine like ice. Inside were documents detailing Jason's prison record, his upcoming release, and most terrifyingly, a recent letter where he'd written about finding my girls once he was free. The paper crumpled in her white-knuckled grip. "He'll never find you here," Victor stated with quiet certainty, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. "My security team has been briefed. Jason Miller will not set foot on this property." The intensity in his dark eyes sent a different kind of shiver through Alessandra, one she wasn't ready to examine. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered to the mansion's solarium where moonlight streamed through glass walls onto exotic plants. The soft hum of someone speaking drew her attention to Victor, seated in his wheelchair among the shadows, reading aloud from a battered copy of The Little Prince. Maya sat cross-legged beside him, her favorite rabbit clutched to her chest as she listened with rapt attention. "Read the part about the fox again," she requested sleepily, leaning trustingly against the wheel of his chair. "I like when they become friends even though they're different." Victor's voice softened as he turned back pages, the harsh lines of his face gentled by moonlight, and the presence of a child who saw only the man, not the fearsome reputation. He read the passage with surprising tenderness, his accent wrapping around Saint-Exupéry's words about taming and forming bonds. Alessandra remained in the doorway, transfixed by the unexpected tableau before her. The notorious MAFIA boss crippled by his enemies now reading bedtime stories to her daughter. It was a scene she couldn't have imagined a week ago, yet there was something achingly beautiful about its simplicity. When Maya finally dozed off, Victor carefully lifted her with surprisingly strong arms, wincing slightly at the strain on his healing body. He froze when he spotted Alessandra watching, vulnerability and something like embarrassment flashing across his features before the familiar mask slipped back into place. She couldn't sleep, he explained unnecessarily, his voice a rough whisper. I found her wandering the halls looking for the kitchen. Apparently midnight snacks are a tradition between you two. His arms cradled Maya with protective gentleness that made Alessandra's heart twist unexpectedly in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and Alessandra found herself drawn into Victor's world despite her initial resistance. She learned about his family business, the legitimate parts involving real estate and shipping companies, carefully sidestepping questions about the other aspects that occasionally brought men with hard eyes and concealed weapons to late-night meetings. Maya blossomed in the strange new environment, exploring the gardens with Mrs. Davenport and decorating Victor's study with colorful drawings. Most surprising was how Victor encouraged her artistic efforts, proudly displaying a particularly abstract rendering of himself beside his computer, where important associates would inevitably see it. "Why did you become this?" Alessandra asked one evening as they shared wine on the terrace after Maya had gone to bed. "You're educated, intelligent. You could have been anything." The question had lingered for weeks, growing more insistent as she glimpsed the man beneath the dangerous facade. Victor's gaze turned distant, focused on something beyond the carefully manicured gardens. "My father built this empire from nothing after immigrating with empty pockets and big dreams," he replied, swirling the ruby liquid in his glass. "Family legacy is a powerful inheritance. It shapes you before you're old enough to choose another path." Alessandra thought of her own childhood, in a series of cramped apartments, her mother working multiple jobs after her father abandoned them. "I understand inherited burdens," she said softly, "but we still make choices about what to carry forward and what to leave behind." Victor studied her face in the fading light, something unreadable shifting in his expression. "Before my injury, I never questioned my path," he admitted, his voice roughened with rare honesty. "Now I find myself wondering what legacy I'm truly building, and whether it's one worth the sacrifices it demands." Their conversation was interrupted by Franco appearing silently at the terrace door, his expression grim as he requested a private word with his boss. Victor excused himself with reluctant formality, the warmth of their discussion immediately replaced by the cold efficiency of business as he wheeled himself away. When he returned an hour later, the man who had read bedtime stories and discussed philosophy was gone, replaced by the calculating crime boss with eyes like flint. "The Donatos have made another move against one of our warehouses," he stated flatly, his accent thickening with suppressed anger. "3 of my men won't be going home to their families tonight." The mansion's peaceful routine shattered like glass in the days that followed. Armed men patrolled the grounds in increased numbers, their faces grim and watchful. Alessandra kept Maya close, their explorations of the gardens and grounds now limited to areas directly visible from the house. Victor withdrew into strategy meetings that stretched through days and nights, emerging only briefly with dark circles beneath his eyes, and tension radiating from his rigid posture. When Alessandra brought him coffee during one rare break, the gratitude in his weary smile made her heart stutter traitorously. "You should leave," he told her bluntly that evening, his voice hollow as he stared out the study window. "I can arrange for you and Maya to disappear. New identities, a comfortable life far from Chicago, and the danger I've brought to your door." His reflection in the glass revealed pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Alessandra should have felt relief at the offer of escape, but instead, a strange emptiness opened inside her. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly, watching his shoulders stiffen at the question. "For us to disappear from your life as suddenly as we entered it?" His knuckles whitened on the wheelchair arms as he turned to face her. "What I want ceased to matter the day the Donatos took my ability to walk and my brother's life," he replied, bitterness lacing each word. "This war will only escalate, and I refuse to add a woman and child to the casualties my family has already suffered." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, marking the heavy silence between them. "Maya asks for you every night at bedtime," Alessandra finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She misses your stories, and the way you help her name the constellations from the solarium roof." Something flickered in Victor's expression, longing quickly masked by resolution. "Children are remarkably adaptable," he stated with forced detachment, turning his wheelchair away from her. "She'll forget me soon enough once you're settled somewhere safe, somewhere normal." Alessandra moved to stand before him, blocking his retreat with quiet determination. "Running didn't save me from Jason," she reminded him softly, It just meant living in constant fear, looking over my shoulder, teaching my daughter to be afraid of shadows. Her hands trembled slightly as she knelt to his eye level. I'm not afraid of your enemies, Victor, she continued, surprising herself with the truth of the words. I'm afraid of watching you surrender to bitterness, of seeing you lock away the man who reads French philosophy to a 5-year-old and debates classic literature with her mother until dawn. Victor's carefully constructed walls crumbled for a heartbeat, raw emotion flooding his features, as his hand rose involuntarily to touch her cheek. You should be afraid, he whispered hoarsely. The things I've done, the blood on my hands. I'm not the hero of this story, Alessandra. The sudden blaring of security alarms shattered the moment between them. Victor's expression transformed instantly to cold calculation as Franco burst through the study door, gun already drawn. Perimeter breach on the east side, he reported tersely. At least 6 men, heavily armed. Donato's signature approach. Victor's hands flew to the desk drawer, retrieving a handgun which he checked with practiced efficiency. Get Alessandra and Maya to the panic room, he ordered Franco. All vulnerability vanished from his face and voice. Standard protocol. No one enters without my direct authorization. What about you? Alessandra demanded, fear clawing at her throat, as security personnel rushed past the open door, weapons ready. Victor's smile was grim as he unlocked the brakes on his wheelchair, determination hardening his features into something almost unrecognizable. It seems I'm tired of hiding behind these walls, he replied quietly, sliding the gun into his jacket. Perhaps it's time Donato discovers that a wounded lion is still a lion. The wheelchair moved toward the door with deliberate purpose, leaving Alessandra torn between following Franco's urgent gestures and staying with the man who had become so unexpectedly important to her. Franco gripped Alessandra's arm, pulling her toward the hidden panic room as gunshots echoed through the mansion's hallways. Maya was already inside, clutching Mrs. Davenport's hand with wide, frightened eyes that immediately sought her mother's face. The heavy steel door slid shut behind them with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them away from the chaos. Mommy, what's happening? Maya whispered, small fingers trembling as they wrapped around Alessandra's. Are the bad men trying to hurt Mr. Victor again? Her innocence in this world of violence was like a knife twisting in Alessandra's heart. Security monitors embedded in the walls displayed various areas of the estate. Men in tactical gear exchanging gunfire with Victor's security forces, smoke billowing from the east wing, and most disturbingly, Victor himself, wheeling purposefully through the library toward what appeared to be the main confrontation. His expression was coldly determined, all traces of the gentle man they'd come to know erased by necessary savagery. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by Maya's eventual exhausted slumber and the occasional update from Franco's earpiece. Donato himself is here, he muttered grimly, checking his weapon for the 3rd time. This isn't just a hit. They've come to negotiate from a position of strength. Alessandra paced the confined space, her thoughts racing with memories of Victor's rare smiles, his patience with Maya, the way his voice softened when he spoke of his dreams before the injury. The man on the monitors, calmly directing his men through bloodshed, seemed a stranger wearing his face. When the all-clear finally came, dawn was breaking over the estate, pale light illuminating the aftermath of violence. Franco escorted them through corridors bearing evidence of gunfire and struggle, past grim-faced men removing dark shapes in body bags. Alessandra kept Maya's face pressed against her shoulder, shielding her from sights no child should witness. They found Victor in his study, his wheelchair positioned behind the massive oak desk that suddenly seemed more throne than furniture. A distinguished older man sat across from him, his tailored suit immaculate despite the night's events, his silver hair perfectly styled. The family resemblance to the men who'd attacked Victor in the alley was unmistakable. This was Donato himself. Ah, the woman and child, Donato remarked with cold interest, his accent thicker than Victor's but his English flawless. So the rumors are true. The mighty Costello has acquired himself a little makeshift family. His tone made the observation an insult, though his smile remained perfectly polite. Victor's expression betrayed nothing, but his knuckles whitened on the armrests of his chair. They are under my protection, and not part of our discussion, Salvatore, he stated flatly, using the man's first name with deliberate disrespect. State your terms so we can end this charade of diplomacy. Donato's smile never wavered as he leaned forward, placing a small USB drive on the desk between them. My terms are simple. Transfer control of the harbor operations to my family, and I guarantee the safety of your guests, he explained, his gaze sliding meaningfully to Alessandra and Maya. "Refuse, and I cannot promise they won't become collateral damage in our ongoing disagreement." The air in the room seemed to crystallize, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Victor's eyes flicked briefly to Alessandra's face, something unreadable passing through his expression, before the mask of indifference settled back into place. "You have until midnight to consider my offer," Donato continued smoothly, rising to his feet with the confidence of a man who believes he's already won. After he departed with his remaining men, Victor's composure cracked like glass, his fist slamming against the desk with such force that Maya startled awake in Alessandra's arms. "He's found my weakness," Victor muttered, more to himself than to them. All these years of careful distance, of keeping everyone at arm's length, and now he knows exactly where to strike. Alessandra sent Maya with Mrs. Davenport for breakfast before approaching Victor, who sat motionless behind his desk, staring at the USB drive as if it might detonate. "The harbor operations, what would losing them mean?" she asked quietly, perching on the edge of the desk beside his wheelchair. "Financial setback, loss of strategic position, weakened standing among the other families," he replied mechanically, his voice devoid of emotion. "But he doesn't truly want the harbor. He wants to prove he can make me kneel, force me to surrender something valuable to save something I value more." His eyes lifted to her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Night fell with no resolution, the mansion eerily quiet after the previous day's violence. Victor had withdrawn completely, locked in meetings with his advisors, while Alessandra tried to maintain normalcy for Maya's sake. As the midnight deadline approached, she tucked her exhausted daughter into bed, then made her way to Victor's study where light still burned beneath the door. Victor sat alone, the room shadowed except for a single desk lamp that cast harsh light across his features. The USB drive lay before him, alongside a glass of amber liquid that appeared untouched. He didn't look up when Alessandra entered, his focus entirely on the small photograph he held between his fingers. A younger version of himself, standing beside a smiling man who shared his eyes and jawline. "My brother Carlo," he explained without being asked, his voice rough with emotion he rarely displayed. "The day he graduated from law school, he was going to be the legitimate face of our family, the one who would eventually lead us away from the old ways." The photograph trembled slightly in his grasp. Alessandra moved to stand behind him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly, though part of her already knew the answer, had seen it forming in his eyes throughout the day. He would sacrifice his business interests to protect them. The ruthless crime boss would surrender to save a woman and child who had inexplicably become important to him. "I've made arrangements for you and Maya," he replied, carefully setting the photograph aside. "New identities, a house in Seattle, enough money that you'll never need to worry about finances again." His hand reached up to cover hers where it rested on his shoulder, his skin warm against her fingers. A sudden explosion shattered the night, the force of it rattling windows throughout the mansion. Victor's head snapped up, expression shifting instantly to alert calculation. "They're early," he murmured, reaching for the drawer where Alessandra knew he kept his gun. Franco should have... The study door burst open, Franco stumbling through with blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. "Betrayal," he gasped, collapsing against the doorframe. Someone disabled the perimeter alarms. They're already inside. His eyes met Victor's with desperate urgency. "The panic room! Get there now!" Victor's wheelchair moved with surprising speed as he grabbed Alessandra's wrist, pulling her toward the hidden passage behind the bookshelf. "Maya!" she gasped, trying to turn toward the hallway that led to her daughter's room. The sound of gunfire and shouting grew louder, chaos erupting throughout the mansion. "Franco will get her," Victor assured her, his grip unyielding as he pressed the mechanism that revealed the secret corridor. "We have protocols for this. She'll meet us in the safe room." The certainty in his voice steadied her briefly, until another explosion rocked the building. Closer this time, plaster dust raining from the ceiling. Alessandra wrenched free of his grasp with sudden determination. "I'm getting my daughter," she stated, backing away from him with resolution hardening her features. "I won't hide while she's in danger." Before he could protest, she was running down the hallway, instinct overriding fear as she navigated toward Maya's room. The corridor was filled with smoke, making her eyes water and lungs burn as she pressed forward. Gunshots echoed from the main foyer, punctuated by shouts in Italian too rapid for her to translate. Crouching low, she reached Maya's door, relief flooding her when she found her daughter huddled beneath the bed, frightened but unharmed. "Mommy's here, baby," she whispered, pulling Maya into her arms. "We need to be very quiet and brave now, okay?" The little girl nodded against her shoulder, her small body trembling. Alessandra peered cautiously into the hallway, trying to remember the route to the panic room that Franco had shown them after the first attack. They had almost reached the hidden elevator that would take them to safety when heavy footsteps sounded behind them. Alessandra pushed Maya into a darkened alcove, placing herself between her daughter and the approaching danger. A tall figure emerged through the smoke, the resemblance to Donato unmistakable in his features, his son, whom Alessandra had glimpsed briefly during the earlier confrontation. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, gun held casually at his side as he spotted them. Costello's little pets trying to escape. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he raised the weapon, aiming it directly at Alessandra with cold precision. "Nothing personal, sweetheart. Just business." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Maya's terrified cry, the gun swinging toward the sound, and Alessandra's body moving on pure maternal instinct. She lunged forward with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, catching the man off guard as she slammed into his midsection with all her strength. The gun discharged, the bullet embedding itself in the wall as they crashed to the floor together. Alessandra fought with desperate fury, clawing and striking at any vulnerable area she could reach. "Run, Maya!" she screamed, managing to slam her elbow into the man's throat as he struggled to regain control of the weapon. Victor appeared at the end of the hallway, propelling his wheelchair forward with powerful strokes of his arms. His face transformed with rage when he saw the struggle before him, his hand already raising his own weapon with deadly intent. The gunshot echoed deafeningly in the confined space, and Donato's son collapsed, a look of surprise frozen on his features. "Are you hurt?" Victor demanded, wheeling closer to where Alessandra knelt, gasping for breath. Before she could answer, his expression changed to one of horror. "Maya," he whispered, looking past her to where the little girl stood frozen in the alcove, a spreading crimson stain visible on her nightgown. The hospital waiting room was sterile and cold, fluorescent lights harsh against Alessandra's tear-stained face as she paced the small space. Victor sat motionless in his wheelchair, his customary mask of control shattered by the sight of Maya's small body on a gurney, doctors rushing her toward surgery. The bullet had grazed her side, painful but not life-threatening, according to the preliminary assessment. "This is my fault," Victor whispered, his voice raw with self-recrimination. "Everything I touch turns to ashes. My family's legacy, my brother's life, and now an innocent child." His hands gripped the wheelchair arms so tightly that his knuckles gleamed white under the hospital lights. Alessandra knelt before him, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Listen to me, Victor Costello," she said fiercely, tears streaming unchecked down her cheeks. "Maya is alive because of you, because you gave us shelter, because you protected us, because you reached us in time." Her hands covered his, warm and steady despite her fear. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by occasional updates from medical staff. The surgery was successful, they assured. Maya would recover fully with time and care. When they were finally allowed to see her, the sight of her small form dwarfed by the hospital bed broke something in both of them. Victor remained in the doorway, hesitant to approach, as if fearing his presence might somehow cause more harm. Alessandra sat at Maya's bedside, gently stroking her daughter's hair as the child drifted in and out of sedated sleep. When Maya's eyes finally focused clearly, her first whispered question was unexpected. "Where's Mr. Victor? Is he okay?" At those words, something shifted in Victor's expression, resolve crystallizing in his eyes as he finally moved his wheelchair to the bedside. "I'm here, little one," he said softly, reaching out to take her tiny hand in his. "And I've made an important decision while you were sleeping." His gaze lifted to meet Alessandra's questioning look over Maya's head. "The Donato family's operations have been dismantled," he stated with quiet certainty. "My contacts in law enforcement received anonymous evidence of their criminal enterprises this morning, including proof of last night's attack." The implication hung in the air between them. Victor had sacrificed his own immunity to ensure their safety. Alessandra's breath caught in her throat as she understood the magnitude of what he had done. "Your family business," she began, but he shook his head, cutting off her words with a gentle smile that transformed his face into something younger, unburdened. "My legitimate holdings remain intact. The real estate developments, shipping companies, restaurants," he explained, his fingers still entwined with Maya's. "The other aspects of the Costello empire are being restructured." The careful choice of words acknowledged Maya's presence while conveying his meaning clearly to Alessandra. 3 months later, the mansion had transformed along with its owner. Gone were the armed guards and security checkpoints, replaced by landscapers tending expansive gardens and contractors renovating the East Wing into what would become a rehabilitation center for spinal injury patients. Victor's physical therapy had progressed remarkably. He now walked short distances with the aid of specialized braces and a cane. Alessandra found him in the solarium, surrounded by architectural plans and medical equipment catalogs. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, highlighting the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair at the temples. "The Foundation Board approved the funding for the pediatric wing," she announced, sliding a folder onto the table beside him. "Construction can begin next month." Victor's smile was genuine, lacking the cold calculation that had once been his default expression. Carlo would have approved of this legacy, he mused, reaching for Alessandra's hand. He always said our family name should stand for something beyond fear and power. The gold band on his finger caught the light as his fingers intertwined with hers. Maya burst into the room with the boundless energy of a fully recovered 6-year-old, waving a brightly colored drawing. "Look what I made for my new room," she exclaimed, presenting her artwork with flourishing pride. The crayon illustration showed 3 stick figures standing before a house: a tall woman with a smile, a smaller girl with curly hair, and a man with a cane, all holding hands beneath a radiant sun. Victor lifted her onto his lap with practiced ease, his strength returning more each day along with his hope for a future he'd once thought impossible. "It's beautiful, little lioness," he murmured, using the nickname that had stuck after nurses commented on Maya's fierce determination during recovery. "Shall we hang it in the family gallery alongside the Renaissance paintings?" As evening fell, they stood together on the mansion's veranda, watching fireflies emerge like floating stars above the gardens. Victor's arm circled Alessandra's waist, his weight partially supported by the cane at his side. "When you found me in that alley, I was a man broken in body and spirit," he said quietly, his voice carrying in the peaceful stillness. "I never imagined that saving me would transform all our lives." Alessandra leaned into his embrace, remembering the frightened woman who had once fled from an abusive relationship with nothing but her daughter and desperate courage. "Sometimes family isn't something you're born into," she replied, watching Maya chase fireflies across the lawn with delighted laughter. "It's something you build one act of kindness at a time." Bye. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is important for me to continue creating content here.